When the trustees and I were looking at how we scaled a Band of Brothers, we were really conscious that we wanted to avoid some of the typical pitfalls around what happens when charities grow. How do you keep the same high standards and quality? How do you avoid putting in layer after layer of management supervision, creating this big head office that suddenly, rather than economies of scale, you've created so many diseconomies of scale? Any new instance of a Band of Brothers, whether it launches in Bradford or Basingstoke, is exactly the same in terms of quality as the original instance in Brighton. And that feels really important to us. We haven't got £1 million of overhead sat in an office somewhere supporting the organisation. We don't need that because of the structure that we've chosen.
One of the reasons I think I probably first got involved and interested in Band of Brothers was my experience trying to craft policy and public policy for what are sometimes described as the wicked issues. The things that you really aren't going to be able to solve with one simple commission solution. Youth crime, mental health and physical health, homelessness and what makes people homeless, how we integrate young men particularly into society. We find it really difficult to say, do you know what, that hasn't worked. What we need to do is experiment with some new stuff. And I'm delighted to say, with the benefit of 7 years experience, I think it is really powerful and has a profound impact on not just the young men, but their families and their communities as well.
It's heartbreaking that we live in an age where the expressions of failure as our society are all around us and they're completely unavoidable in daily life. And what's extraordinary for me is how this community is providing the complete opposite, and that is also how our society is capable of healing. A community response to the failures that we do see in our daily life.
With my experience, the young men that we've actually engaged with Band of Brothers, it's been incredibly successful.
I think the Band of Brothers fills a unique space in that, and that's why I wanted to raise the profile of the Band of Brothers in Parliament when I was speaking.
Mr. Speaker, last week I was privileged to attend a Crawley Band of Brothers ceremony where men mentor former young offenders to help them turn their life around. Can my right honourable friend say what further steps his department can take to encourage such voluntary groups to help the rehabilitation of offenders?
Well, I share my honourable friend's enthusiasm for what voluntary groups like a Band of Brothers can do alongside the work of our public sector probation professionals to reduce reoffending further, which is what our reforms are all about.
It's a shame for me that the visibility of the solution is not as high as the visibility of some of the failures that we see, but it is here and it's here nonetheless.
By proving the case now for those types of interventions, that evidence base, that proof of concept, that template being in existence will enable us to take action quicker and with more efficacy than if the sector had laid dormant for the last decade.
I really feel that people a lot of them don't actually have any empathy with what we do. They just see the people that we work with as a lost cause, and maybe there's no hope for them. They just turn their back on them, and they don't understand. They don't understand what we do, and maybe it's because they're frightened of the young people we work with. They see them as dangerous, shut down emotionally. I think what you do is you manage somehow to actually open them up so that they can get rid of a lot of emotional baggage, and then they can come back to us and be a lot more receptive to the type of support that we have to offer them.
It's incredibly moving to see not only how people have been encouraged to form those relationships that will overcome those obstacles, but also the courage it took to share those experiences. I mean, that is an absolutely phenomenal achievement and is a real credit to the Band of Brothers.
Do I wish that more funders of the criminal justice system were prepared to be brave and step into spaces like this? Absolutely. I think it would have a significant impact on a generation of young people, but also on our community as a large.
We are about giving local older men back the responsibility for stewarding the personal, emotional growth of young men in their societies.
Men who are equally passionate, who are equally solid, who are willing to look at themselves, their strengths, and also what might get in the way of really showing up and being potent mentors, potent supporters and advocates for the youth in their community.
We are establishing deep-rooted, sustainable community activity in all of the areas that we're in. Almost every single hour of activity that sustains a Band of Brothers is given by volunteers. We've grown from being a small voluntary organisation in Brighton, turning over about 10-15 grand a year, working with a handful of young men, to now 10 years on, operating in 6 different locations across the UK, launching and developing in a further 4, and turning over in the region of £350,000–400,000 a year. Additionally, we've also got a social franchise model in place, which means that anybody across the UK or potentially even across the world can pick up the principles, the tenets, the methodology that we use and bring it to their community. And that feels extraordinarily exciting. It feels like a really good time to be getting involved with this organisation.
Any grants that we receive actually make a real difference. And I know some people might be sitting there and thinking, well, what could 20 or 30k really do? For starters, the money that we receive goes directly into helping us run the trainings. We have those young men go through an intense weekend and follow up 12-week cycle, which fundamentally helps them to look at all the parts of themselves that might be getting in the way of living the lives that they want to live and attending to the things that have really held them back. That money that's invested in any particular community is investing in that community being there for good. Showing up time and time again, not just for this cohort of young men, but for every single cohort that comes after in perpetuity.
We are still in personal touch with the vast majority of the men that were on our first programme. It is important now to fund organisations such as ours that are enabling community level responses to complex and wicked social problems like young male disaffection and offending.
These are the sorts of organisations and these are the kind of groups which are going to help our community heal. Without groups like Band of Brothers, I simply don't see how our community can overcome some of the challenges that we have at the moment.